The only way the Democrats are going to win, Thomas, is if they cheat and they rig elections.
That's right, Betsy. And we've, as you've pointed out in your recent compilation of efforts that we've put into intelligence reports, as well as many audios, videos, and all kinds of articles that have been handed forth to show that we have the evidence demonstrating election corruption. And we've told you where to look, who's behind it, and how they do it.
Yes, Patriots. We have been asked by several of you out here to put together a collection of the work we've already done in the election rigging arena. So if you look down in the description box, you're going to find a hyperlink that will take you to all of these articles. Please share them. We need to get the word out that the election rigging goes very, very deep into the digital cyber world. So Thomas, I know it's a vast amount of information, but what are folks going to find here when they go to that link?
Well, Betsy, when they read these articles that you've put together and your team has put together, they will find all of the indictable evidence they need to put certain individuals who own the election machines and other individuals who own the software that runs those machines. The software is called Optech. And then we've pointed out that Mitt Romney and his son Tad run their own company of election machines. And when you look into who owns the election machines, it's only about 6 or 7 companies in all of America, and they all use the same software. And it has been demonstrated by junior high school students that you can go to up to any one of these machines, and in less than 2 minutes, rig it. In less than 2 minutes, get in and change votes. And that is the tip of the iceberg, because once they get calculated and they get given to the secretaries of state, these machines go online to send their information to the state. And at that moment, they are completely vulnerable and for attack. And we have shown how in past elections, white hats, good guys, good gals, go in and freeze those cells so they cannot be manipulated before they are transmitted. And now, recently, in just the last few weeks, to show that a lot of people are waking up in many arenas pointing at election corruption, trying to make sure that this next election for the president, which is absolutely critical for literally human history, that will not be so tampered as the 2016 was. But we're going to talk about that. 2016 was tampered with, but Trump still won because of the landslide. Now, people are saying, but the election corruption is going on. Oh, yes, we've named where it is. And in these articles, we've named exactly who and when and where, why and how much, and showed you exactly how it works so that you can see it with your own eyes. And then you need to be one of these people that we have helped activate, whether it's writing a writ of mandamus for your state, or whether it's making sure there's identification for voters, or making sure that we separate out the people who have stolen Social Security numbers and use that as their method for identification, which then becomes the method through their license, basically, the Department of Motor Vehicles for their state. All they have to do is pass the test to get a license, and they get to vote. We have to stop this. All these things are being questioned now.
When you go in and read the articles, you're going to see some names appear over and over in the articles, and they are Dianne Feinstein, Mitt Romney, George Soros, Mark Malloch-Brown. You're going to see Facebook and Google and Obama all in there. You're going to see the Privy Council is involved in this. And you're even going to see some players you might not know who they are, like Cloudflare's Joe Sullivan. And these are the people that will still be behind the scenes, still doing this nefarious digital work to rig the elections.
Yes, Cloudflare is like the system that speeds up the crypto keys. And the crypto keys, we have pointed out, are owned by a company that started off in Canada called Intrust. Somehow we give out American military crypto keys, the top secret encryption keys, to a Canadian company, then comes into America, and then gets owned by a friend of Hillary Clinton, and basically was always ran by a friend of Hillary Clinton, and then moves to China. So when we pointed all these things out, and so Joe Sullivan is a person who took that, amplified it so that anybody who has any of the crypto keys, including Robert Mueller and Hillary Clinton and Mr. Jones, I can't remember his first name, Jerry Jones or James Jones.
Are you talking about Thoma Bravo?
And Thoma Bravo and Entrust and Axiom and all these, they change names all the time to try to hide what they're doing. But the crypto keys can go in, and as these machines in the state, the Secretary of State office is sending in to the federal government the election results, they can be intercepted, manipulated without anyone knowing it, change the numbers and sent. This has been demonstrated.
In fact, during the election, votes were sent over to Ireland. U.S. votes were in this man-in-the-middle scheme are sent over to Ireland, a foreign country, to be voted, to be counted, then to be returned, and who knows what that number is, back to the United States for official counting. And we also have in this article a post of questions that average patriots like you out there can start asking your election officials. And this just doesn't affect American elections. Mark Malloch-Brown and George Soros affect elections everywhere in the world.
And that's not an exaggeration or a conspiracy. Mark Malloch-Brown, when he was second in charge of the United Nations, worked with Jimmy Carter in Venezuela to develop Optech, the very software that manipulates elections throughout the world, basically, but certainly throughout all of America to this very day. And Lord Mark Malloch-Brown is also a propagandist, and along with Jeffrey Patty, both Privy Council members of the British monarchy, they are propagandists of the worst type, and they pride themselves in saying that they have intervened in over 100 elections throughout the world and changed people's minds. They basically produce opinion. They give you your opinion. They manipulate you through all kinds of means, which we've gone into great detail. But let's just point out that we also have some audios where we discuss some of the more modern things that have been actually added to some of our research, which is Dr. Epstein from an Ivy League college did an analysis to say that 25 million votes were changed by persuasion manipulation through the internet. And some say that that number is small compared to if you add the manipulation of Facebook and not just Google's algorithms, but just the algorithms of Google changed 25 million votes and changed people's way of thinking of things. Now, if you add, and that's the reason Dianne Feinstein's there and her husband, Michael Bloom, they own Avid, ISIS Management, and a company called Leader Plus. I think it's been changed too, but they were the company that the night of the election tells you who wins. Well, those are fake. And then what happens before the election is over and before the votes are counted? That night, you have people capitulating. And once they capitulate, there's no need to count votes. You can't even question it if you've capitulated. So this happens, and this is Avid Management, ISIS Management, Avid, which is a news manipulation agency. Now, we've pointed out that that is used in every major mainstream media, comes across there. Basically, the words that come across at the bottom of the screen are from Avid and ISIS Management, but they also then go through a system that $1.5 billion was donated by Eric Schmidt to create a thing called the Digital News Service. And that scrubs 125 different agencies' broadcast before they go out to make sure that they are scrubbed of any information that Eric Schmidt doesn't want you to know. Now, Eric Schmidt gave over $1 billion to the 2016 elections through creating a donation, through creating a thing called the U.S. Digital Service, which was an Obama group using members of Google and Facebook who rotated in and out for free, which was really a donation to the Democrat Party, coordinating all digital information that was available to the federal government through the White House, through the U.S. Digital Service, which was funded in part by U.S. tax funds, in part by Eric Schmidt.
We actually have a picture of these Google employees for the U.S. Digital Service working in the White House doing the very thing you just described.
Now, that's bad. But that's how they needed to coordinate all digital information so that they could manipulate you. Now, how did they manipulate you? Through a thing that is now sold to the public called Palantir by Peter Thiel, the person who got rich off of the fake lie that he helped invent the technology of PayPal. He went over to Palantir, and what does that do? You can target any group of people through the demographics or logistics you plug into the computer, and then after targeting them, you can surveil them, and then you can manipulate them. And you can literally design for them a specific attack that goes after manipulating their way of thinking. Now, this is for commerce, for what you buy, but it's also just for fun as a psyops for the military, but it's also for election rigging. 25 million votes were changed in this fashion just through the algorithms that Eric Schmidt changed for the 2016 election. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's also Groundworks, which he created for Obama before that, and then a group after that called Narwhal, and then a group after that are these groups we're discussing. But during that time, Hillary Clinton signed off of GSA appropriation funds to hire Dmitry Shevchenko to pay for him to create, before the 2016 election, because she knew she was going to run, a program to manipulate voters through the internet called the Template for Winning the Election. And it was paid for by U.S. government funds, but Dmitry wrote it in India at the time. We give you all this information. So anything I'm saying now is backed up by so much information that when you see this compilation that Betsy's put together, it's enough to keep you busy until Election Day, showing the proof of rigging in our elections in America.
And our proof isn't conspiracy theory, and it's not fluff. I mean, we give you the evidence you need to see how this is all working. This is why it's really important to be a part, if you can be, of the Trump rallies. The Trump rallies is a visual way for us to see the support that our movement has. You can't see that kind of support or unsupport in a digital world, and if votes are changed, you can't see it. But when you see these rallies filled with patriots, and you see the parking lot filled, and you see 2 or 3 parking lots filled, you are voting, and you are sending a message for others to see in this country that there is huge support for Make America Great Again.
And we saw that during the 2016 election that Hillary Clinton would go into a high school gym and couldn't fill it, so they would simply replicate and multiply the number of people in the audience through the computer-generated images. It was so pathetic what we saw, and we're seeing it again now with this election.
Yes, but as patriots see the rallies full, and then they look at Joe Biden and see just a few people, if the election results come back rigged in the way that these folks rig them, people will know. This time they will know.
I would suggest that people, if that happens, and we see that there was a landslide for Trump and the Republicans to get rid of these crazy Democrats, which, remember...
Not just Democrats.
And
I'd like to get rid of Mitt Romney.
Oh, yes.
And I'd like to know why his niece is the chairwoman of the RNC. And I'd like to know why she isn't reporting on her cousin Tag and her uncle Mitt using these devices to rig elections, because they're rigging them also for these never-Trumper rhinos and rats.
You are so right. And why isn't she bringing the full weight of the law down upon the Democratic National Committee for rigging 17 primaries, for lying to everyone that they took the money from? Of course, it's only unethical. All they had to do was fire Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and that's what the court said. She's the only person responsible. But they need to point out that if Hillary Clinton files, which we assume she will, unless she dies, I assume she's going to keep running, even if she gets nominated from the floor of the Democratic National Committee. And it won't matter because it's a completely rigged system. So Trump has shown by what he has said that by pointing at the demon rats, the Democrats, that they're all running around like crazy, and they're showing who they are, and they're biting each other, and they're biting everybody and they're poisonous rats. Well, here's the deal. He did that on purpose. And he did it as he did before. he destroyed the people who were running against him in the Republican primaries. Because why? He showed them for who they were. He called them out exactly as he did on The Apprentice. He would simply call you the name that you deserve to be called, and then do with you what the boss would do with somebody like that. So that's what we're seeing with the Democrat candidates, the Democrat candidates, and we're seeing such leaning to the left that socialism becomes fascism, that becomes chaos Marxism, that becomes communism. And we see that in Venezuela, but that's where Optech cut its teeth to create election rigging. And it's still going, thank you, Jimmy Carter, it's still going on to this day for those of you who think that the United Nations or Jimmy Carter were working on your side.
I mean, how do you think Mitt Romney won, really? He ran against a woman, Jenny Wilson, which is pretty popular. Mitt wasn't doing well in the polls that we trusted, and all of a sudden he wins to get in the Senate. No, he used his own software to rig his own election.
That's true, and also I pointed out at the time that when he took that old beat-up car of his and drove it around to meet each of the election bosses of each of the counties, didn't meet with people, but he met privately with these individuals. He had a trunk full of cash, and that's how he won, as well as they allowed him to manipulate the machines. And those machines he used, that particular brand was not used in Utah, but it's used in 17 other states. But all he had to do was work with another person like himself who owns the Sequoia system, which I believe is what was used in that state. But there's only like 7 of these companies together.
But they all use Optech.
And they all use Optech. So he can go in and manipulate it even if it wasn't his machines.
And what I'm saying is, Rona Romney, she knows all this is going on. And she hasn't uttered anything to any of us. I mean, you look at Liz Cheney. I mean, this is the spawn of that demon Dick Cheney. And she has been elected by Patriots. She is a never-Trumper rat rhino through and through. She is demon spawn. Why in the world are people electing her? And I'm saying they aren't. It's the rigged system.
Well, let's go back in time and forward in time. Okay, and back in time, the Diebold machines were questioned in Ohio by hundreds of lawyers, demonstrated that they gave fractional voting, and that when you voted for one candidate, it might show up that you voted for the other candidate, but for sure it chopped it into pieces and gave fractions of those votes because it would give you results in fractions. The votes were in fractions. And then they went and they tested these both in Florida and Ohio, demonstrated that all the... I heard the guy who owned...
Fractional voting. Yes. What is that?
Fractional voting. And I heard the guy who owned Diebold say out loud in public, if the Republicans, he said this for, I believe it was Baby Bush's first term, if the Republicans in these certain states would use my machines, my Diebold machines, I can guarantee that the Republicans will win.
No, the Republicans that they want to win, which are really the globalists that are in the form of Republicans. And that's what I want people to wake up to. When you give your 2020 campaign dollars to the RNC, you are giving it to Rona to divvy up among all these rats and rhinos. What we urge Patriots to do for this election cycle 2020 is to give your donation directly to the MAGA candidate of your choice, or to go over to donaldjtrump.com and donate to his site. But Patriots out here on the ground, we need to call out the rotten RNC.
It's important to remember that Paul Manafort is in jail because he was the Republican president maker. That's the reason they went after him. Okay, I said this from the beginning. Nobody wants to acknowledge this. He made President Trump president because he beat this nonsense of trying to negate the general rules and regulations of the Electoral College. If you remember, the Electoral College, they said it doesn't matter who votes for Trump. The Electoral College is going to vote for the other side, vote for Hillary. But in the end, Paul Manafort came in and had them all vote according to their state rules, which now some of those state rules have been changed. At least 4 or 5 states have changed the state rules that they can vote their Electoral College votes in relationship to the popular vote. Now that creates a completely crazy system, okay? Now, that's happening right now. Gerrymandering is happening right now. Demand for identification, proper identification is happening now. People are being called out for the 22 million aliens that are in this country, at least half of them using Social Security numbers of dead people. They vote, okay? How could... Hello? They started the count last time, and that was Mike Pence started to do an investigation of the election last time, as you remember, after Hillary Clinton and Jill Stein questioned it, and they were doing a recount and found after 3 states that there had been corruption on the side of the Democrats. So they stopped the recount, if you remember. Pence did his investigation, found that between 3.5 and 5 million votes were manipulated. I have pointed out that though they say there's 11 million undocumented aliens in this country, there's more than 22. We now know that the FBI has come out and said that we are correct. The Anonymous Patriots Conclave was correct again. There are over 22 million undocumented aliens, most of whom document themselves with the advice given to them by, left-wing, very radical groups and lawyers. So, how about man in the middle? Karl Rove invented the most corrupt system. That's the reason he has been indicted and convicted twice. And that's the reason he's a commentator on the mainstream media. If you get indicted, especially if you go to jail, or if you're like a Ollie North and you are as guilty as sin, then they give you your own show. And so if you're a Clapper or Brennan or you're a McCabe, you just become a commentator that is paid 10 times more than they made as being the head of an intelligence agency who swore not to speak about anything they did for 5 years after they leave their job. So they all should go to jail. But Karl Rove created the man in the middle. It doesn't matter who votes what. When the final count comes down to the federal government, as long as it's sent to the man in the middle, no matter where that is, Karl Rove had his own headquarters, all the votes came through him, and then he sent the votes to D.C. Okay, that's manipulation. And who did he send them to before D.C.? The media. And the media already knew through fake polls and even through, as we've seen, announcements of who wins what with fake numbers. We've seen that on television again and again and again, announcing certain people won fake numbers. Later they retracted. Now, I want to get Betsy all worked up. Ballot harvesting. That there is a name for that type of election rigging corruption, that every single one of them, whoever did it, should go to jail, and we just call it ballot harvesting. We're literally in Florida. How many giant trucks did we see back up and deliver box after box after box until the ballot harvesting produced the very vote that they wanted, the numbers that they wanted? And it's disgusting. Same thing happens all over California. Plus the gerrymandering, jerry-rigging, and the gerrymandering of specifically L.A. and, California, Texas, Florida, some East Coast states. They've gerrymandered everything. And so now there's reverse gerrymandering coming on, with the courts are saying, sorry, Eric Holder, who we pointed out, the number one thing that was happening through Obama's PSA was that Eric Holder was going out, working with the courts, gerrymandering the votes, so that the big cities that have the poorest people who have fallen to the subliminal programming of the far left will vote for them because they keep telling them they're going to help them, though they never do. And nobody notices because the subliminal programming is absolutely profound. So we have shown you all this corruption. We've shown you the history. We've shown you the people. We've shown you the accounts. We've shown you who was paid what, the way they did it, when they did it, and that all this has been exposed. And we've helped other people come to the aid of creating as honest as a 2020 presidential election we can have. It doesn't really matter. He's going to win by a landslide. But we have to bust the system, just like we have to bust the system of fake news. We have to bust the system that he's doing right now with the U.S. Federal Reserve. We have to bust the system with fake tariffs. We have to bust the Walmart control of America through China, through the Clintons. We have to bust all these communist-type systems that give over America's national rights and our sovereignty.
But Thomas, as you conclude, We are winning. Every day gets better.
Absolutely, because people are coming to awaken
Yes.
to the problem.
Yes.
And each one of them is doing what they can
Yes.
to help stop the horrifying corruption which had become completely institutionalized with our past White House dwellers.
Even by showing up at a Trump rally, Patriot, you are saying that you stand for the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the restoration of the Republic.
We don't have to wear a red hat to go out and vote for Trump.